Hi everyone, welcome to Dear BAMf, the show for PR and marketing pros like you, hosted by Beck Bamberger of BAM. BAM is a communications agency that believes stories move the world. We move stories forward for technology-driven brands that challenge, change, and create entire industries. Today, on the Dear BAMf podcast, we're talking with Catherine Thomas, co-founder and VP of Customer Success at careMESH. Catherine has 20 plus years in strategic planning, communications and change management, analyst in media relations, and staff and project leadership. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone. This is Dear BAMf, the podcast for all your comms, marketing, PR problems. We solve them here every single week with our guest pro who's got a lot of background, typically in comms, marketing, PR, all the good things that you come here for, because this is a tough job as we know it. I'm Beck Bamberger. I run BAM, an agency that works with all venture-backed startups across multiple industries. It's a lot of fun and it's never dull, that's for sure. And also I'm co-founder of OnePitch, which is a platform that helps publicists be more efficient in their pitching and getting to the right journalists all the time. With us today is Catherine Thomas. She's the co-founder of careMESH and also newly VP of Customer Success. So we'll talk about that in a second. But welcome, Catherine. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Beck, so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
Are you in DC as well, by the way? I see the Capitol building there in front on your LinkedIn.
We are just outside in Northern Virginia.
I love DC. I was just there. It's a beautiful spot, especially in the summer. So green and lush. Love it.
Yes, thanks.
Well, tell us first about careMESH overall, if you give us the high-level 60-second overview.
Sure. careMESH is a software as a service company focused on healthcare. We're about 4 years old. We've been active in the market for really about 2 years. Mm-hmm. So we're focused on making it possible for our healthcare customers to securely and digitally communicate patient information. The industry has long been reliant on fax, phone calls, and other outdated tools. So essentially, we're dedicated to modernizing the healthcare IT infrastructure and in turn, making it easier for all of us. We're patients, we're caregivers, and need to navigate the system, right? And when we need to do that, it's really beneficial if our different doctors at different organizations can communicate about our care. So that's the problem we're focused on solving. Yes.
That's a big one. Indeed. What are you most proud of accomplishing, would you say, in this last year, especially in healthcare and health tech? There's been a lot of changes with the pandemic.
Right. It's been unprecedented the last 12 months for everyone, right? Yep. And that, of course, has caused us all to have to navigate a really uncertain business landscape. Our hospital customers especially were in absolute crisis. So it necessarily changed what we needed to be focusing on at careMESH. So to your question about what I'm most proud of as a company, as a team of really close-knit employees, I'm most proud of how laser focused we stayed on our mission, on delivering value to our customer base. We stepped back last spring. We took advantage of the time without in-person trade shows or meetings to find some creative new avenues to reach our prospects, to roll up our sleeves and reconsider our product development plans because we recognized really quickly that our customers would come out of the crisis with new priorities. So from a marketing standpoint, that took a lot of patience. It took a lot of patience, as I'm sure it did for you, to be okay with those reduced access to those traditional channels.
For sure.
Our media presence was a challenge, of course. There was so much noise over the last 18 months. So we focused instead on content creation, on operational improvements that would better support our customers. We took the chance to conduct surveys, to interview customers about their careMESH experience. And in general, we focused on the things we could control. And I think that really kept our momentum strong.
That's a good way to focus in it, is always in times of anxiety or you're going, oh God, what can you control? And it's definitely going to be a shorter list, but then focus on that.
Absolutely.
That's what we've been doing too. So I hear you on that. So you mentioned, surveying clients, doing content, going into that. I know you have this new role, which is in customers. So is there a favorite way you're looking at storytelling right now or that you like?
I wish I had a jazzy new answer to
that. Yeah, okay.
I always look to B2C storytelling with a little bit of envy. I think there's a lot of room for creativity and excitement there. But alas, I have long lived in the B2B space, and I'm definitely a pragmatist at heart. And that may or may not bode well for my role leading marketing. But frankly, I think that the priority should be on letting the customer experience speak for itself. So I've always placed an emphasis on case studies, white papers, user interviews. I think that resonates not only with customer prospects, but it also helps bring a more compelling real world story when working with the press as well. And I do think people have their radar pretty finely tuned at this point to recognizing and repelling maybe marketing
stuff. Yeah.
So I do try to create programs by first always putting on my customer hat. My background includes a lot of working with our sales teams at different companies. And I think that helps keep my finger on the pulse of what we're hearing from our industry. And I think the media reacts better to that as well. Real stories, real ROI, real customer benefits. Doing that with data, right?
Yeah. Always data. We were just talking about that on another episode I just did. So to ask you, from a marketing lens, you're sitting pretty closely. Now, you're, of course, an internal person. You're not saying careMESH is a client or something. So it's a little bit different if you're an agency or external versus internal. But what would you say, weekly, daily? How close are you to the sales team? Because I don't hear that often enough, I'd say. And I think it's a great thing to be tied close to your sales teams.
That's interesting that you don't hear that a lot.
Maybe it's happening. People just don't seem to mention it. And I'm like, are you doing? I don't know. Yeah.
I think the size of the organization may have something to do with that. Because we're still small and growing, we're very careful to keep our messaging in lockstep. But even at larger companies that I've been at in the past, I've always focused on that. And maybe sometimes that's taking those opportunities outside of traditional channels. They don't need to be formal meetings, but talk to your sales colleagues because they do have that really close access.
Yeah.
I don't believe marketing should be operating in a vacuum. I never have.
It's not a good idea too. Yes. Okay. So even casual stuff and even in this remote environment, or actually, are you guys able to see each other in the office right now?
We are a pretty distributed organization. Okay. We have people in about 5 or 6 states now.
Oh, okay.
But our executive team is primarily here in Northern Virginia. And so we have made sure to stay in really close touch. Like everybody, we've lived on Zoom.
Yep.
But we have found, at least weekly, when it became reasonable to do so, maybe last fall, to start gathering even outside and getting those opportunities to brainstorm, strategize. That's a little tougher to replicate, I think, over Zoom.
It is. We can use a Jamboard. We love those, but yeah, it is. Right. And nothing beats, if you can, and you're in a place that you can do it, a beautiful outdoor environment that isn't too hot or too cold, or so it's comfortable enough, and you can be in nature or be in a setting where it inspires. That's so good. I love that. But that's hard to get that all organized.
I think you're better off on the West Coast on that than we are.
Yes, I know. That's a California thing for sure. Well, let's get into these questions that we have, Catherine. We got quite a little stack here today. We'll start with this first one. Dear BAMf, my client keeps asking for top-tier coverage, but has absolutely no assets to support a data, customer, or financial storyline. We've outlined narratives we could pitch to top-tier publications and what assets we need to make these stories happen, but the client can't deliver. We don't want to come off as making excuses. Since it's clear the client can't get us what we need for the stories we're trying to tell, what is the best way to crack into tier 1 media when client assets and resources are very limited?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I should be asking you that one. Hey, I said it a few minutes ago. This media environment has been like no other.
Yeah.
Between COVID, the election, last year's BLM protests, it has just gone on. And I think we all expected we'd have a bit more of a return to some semblance of normal by now. But here we are. It's never easy to stand out from the crowd, especially with limited assets. As I said, I'm a strong advocate in content creation. But for the past year, especially as a smaller company, we've worked really hard to tie ourselves to the broader narrative that's going on around us, right? So offering interviews to support publications that are covering the hot topics. I think regardless of what industry you're focused on, COVID changed the conversation. So not just for healthcare or for pharmaceuticals, but for supply chain or transportation, consumer packaged goods. There's so much going on in every industry. So my first thought is, look for those opportunities to start getting a foothold by offering, subject matter experts in those areas. This particular question, though, sounds like, I wonder what the roadblocks are for the client. Why can't they deliver the assets? Are they relying on an inexperienced writer who somehow can't quite figure out how to get something completed?
Yeah.
Is there an executive that's not prioritizing the need for the content? And then somebody internally is waiting to interview him or her. There are services that are available to support content development. There's research firms that can conduct surveys to bring some data to support the company's story. And then even just contracting a writer could be helpful. So that writer could potentially interview customers, build case studies on their behalf, something like that. So perhaps look for some creative ways to try to deliver the assets. I'm not sure how you get coverage when you're not really telling the story in a strong way. I would also manage expectations, though. It takes time to get, top tier coverage. And a lot of writers tend to go to their favorite sources because they know they'll deliver, right?
Yep, reliable.
So I think that just takes some nurturing, frankly, both within the client and in the relationship between the client and the media firm.
This is a sad situation, I feel, for this person. We have definitely been there ourselves, and it could be for a lot of reasons. Catherine, you're kind of like, what is the holdup? It could be they're growing so crazy, so priorities are just shuffling every day. It could be, and this is I think the saddest classic situation, your point of contact is a blocker to other people who can get you things. So they're maybe on a power trip, or they're saddled and they're kind of in your way. They're a roadblock, but they might be so overwhelmed. They might be pulled in so many other directions. It's not like they're probably consciously thinking about that. It's just, it is what it is. So that could be part of it. But to expectation setting, you're totally right. Top tier, you got to bring something. You got to have something. You need to be pointing to definitely having your crap together in terms of assets and so forth. So your alternatives can be, like you mentioned, newsjacking. Okay, do we have prominent enough people? So not just, I started a company a year ago and I'm, just graduated with an electrical engineering degree. Not that caliber, but do you have some pizzazz so that you're qualified and really someone who could speak to whatever is blowing up in that industry that pertains to you? So that's the classic newsjacking type of thing. The thing with newsjacking, though, is you have to be so fiercely on it. So if this is an agency, it sounds like it writing in, that's on you guys. You got to be flagging those and going, hey client, this happened today. This was in the day. This was, hey, can we comment on this? So that it's a pretty involved activity. So newsjacking takes a lot, but because you have to strike while the iron's hot, if you're that active, you could definitely get some wins. That assumes you have quality spokespeople, thought leaders who can be legitimate people to say, hey, this is what's going on in this industry, or this is why this is happening, and so forth. So there's that. And then the other side of that is, now this takes work, is bylines. So can you place bylines, thought pieces, opinion pieces elsewhere? And there's quite a number of opportunities for those. But the thing with that is you got to write the pieces. So if the client can't write it, okay, well, are you guys able to write it? Can you interview that executive for 15 minutes? Have he or she or they dump everything from their mind on that topic, and then you fluff it up and create an 800-word piece, something like that. Again, it's an investment of time, but that is an alternative as well. If you're not going to have all these other things on the table with assets, then data, customers, okay, well, this might be your two other tickets. Not the strongest, but at least something.
Right. Completely agree. Completely agree. Yeah.
Okay, well, next question, Catherine. Ooh, gotta take a sip after. That one. Okay. Dear BAMf. Ooh, okay. Reporters are inundated with funding news, and SPACs seem to be catching up and catching on. How do I level set expectations ahead of a SPAC while pushing to ensure an initial splash and a stream afterwards of coverage? What are the most important factors to get across to reporters when pitching a SPAC?
That's a good question. I kind of wish I was a bit more of an expert on SPACs in general to be answering this. But we've all seen the press.
Yes.
SPACs are getting a lot of attention lately, and rightfully so. These are huge IPOs that are going on. So we've seen a lot of those in digital health so far this year too. Mm-hmm. I hope in this case it drives really strong interest in the company. But that can put the media lead in a little bit of a position of trying to avoid, that sort of Me Too message, right? Mm-hmm. Yet another SPAC. I mean, almost regardless in my mind, I'd love to hear your views on this too. Yeah. But I think it's about telling the good story and standing out from the crowd. And I'm not sure that the SPAC is the be all and end all of this question. It's prepare the basics. I mean, obviously everything around firm history and product offering, unique value prop, the challenges you're solving. I would suggest try to bring some customers to the table to speak on behalf of the company. Really make it very clear. I mean, I hope in this case there are a lot of assets and case studies and other things. Really demonstrate that value is there, that this is not just, I'm sorry, I don't want to use a negative word, but I was going to say a ploy to get public. Yes. Prepare for both the positive and the negative questions that could come. Head off the skepticism potentially if that's of concern in the industry. Conduct media training. Make sure everybody's really ready. I don't know. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, Beck.
Yeah, SPACs are a very popular vehicle right now. I read the Wall Street Journal front to back every day in print, and there's usually 2, if not 3, mentioned in the second section in there. So yeah, it's definitely flavor of the month-ish. It is, just for everybody who doesn't know, a special purpose acquisition company. That's the acronym. And it's basically a big blank check shell company that then goes around and buys up other entities to bolt on basically to this financial vehicle. So it has gotten speculation and just being like, well, but it just kind of fell from the sky. It's not like a company that took 13 years to go ring the bell on the NASDAQ or something. It's like, okay, yes, this is true. But it's actually been around for a couple decades. So it's not even new. It's just become popular as a means to quote unquote get public. So anyway, that's just for overview. But to your point, it is the same with what's the bigger story and what's the why for this company doing this at this time. So we coach this a lot, and we also do these monthly now AMAs, Ask Media Anythings, about funding news, and it's kind of the same thing. No one really cares about the number. I don't care if it's 10 million, 100 million, it doesn't really matter anymore. It's more about, what is the why of this? Is it an interesting why? Is this something we've never seen funded in an industry before? Is it something audacious, or is it something where you're like, oh, it's another tool that's a SaaS plugin for dev teams? Who cares that they raised 30 million? Does anyone care about that? Not really. So what is a broader picture of why this is existing? So, here's another SPAC. Okay. Is it bringing clean water to states that have tainted water? I'm making things up here. Is it saving a certain species and its ability to look in using AI videography to spot areas of, endangered species withdrawal in an environment? I don't know. I'm grasping for straws here, but that's an example. And I'll give you this example. It's not a SPAC, but as one that is going to have some legs. We haven't worked on it, and I'm not going to disclose the company, but there is one coming up that is going to be raising around. And it is a company, it's an AI company. So you're like, oh, wow, another AI company. But what it's doing is preventing forest fires. Well, that is extremely timely, of course, especially right now in the summer when we are at record levels of fires happening across the nation and frankly, across the world. So this is now a global event that happens when the seasons come. They're increasing. So wow, here's technology for good, as you mentioned, Catherine, that's actually addressing a sizable and very important problem. So great, they've raised some money, but they're doing that so that they can get this problem solved in much better ways than we currently are solving it. That's going to have some traction. So honestly, for this person, it's really no different than an IPO or SPAC. Yes, you would do all the same things of getting everyone trained on the media bench and have them all up to speed and know your talking points, of course, but you'll get much further with the bigger why of why is this company doing it. And if it's really, and I think also last thing, really be honest with yourself and this client. If it's just, here's a big, huge company with a lot of effing money just to buy whatever widget type company, is it going to get much splash? Probably not.
Right.
So you got to get to the bigger why of why it exists. And there you can be creative. You might have to grasp at straws, but hopefully you've got something where you're like, ooh, wow, this is a big impactful why. And then curate the story around that.
Right.
That's what I'd say.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you. Well, we've got one last one here. So, Dear BAMf, a big moment is approaching for our venture fund, which I run PR for. One of our portfolio companies, is going public and has been in the media spotlight for good and bad in the last year or so. Initially, our external agency pushed to secure all kinds of media interviews from print to podcast to national TV. Now my partner, however, is getting cold feet. And a day before he was supposed to be on some national TV outlets, he asked to cancel them. We've now done this with this big media moment and have had to save face with all the producers, and I am frustrated. Why did we hire an external agency then for one of our biggest moments as a fund? I get where he's coming from the standpoint of not saying something wrong, but as the agency said, you're in the big leagues now. What's more frustrating is that at first, all the partners, and this one in particular, are all fired up about having any kind of media opportunities. I want to look forward and navigate the situation from here with our agency, but what are your thoughts on the path forward so something like this doesn't happen again?
Ooh, that's a tough situation to be in. Yikes. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, looking backwards first, from an outsider's perspective, it sounds as if you may have had an executive who was not comfortable with speaking to the media. So no matter how excited and energized everybody is around the moment, when it comes right down to it, it's that person with the publication. He or she may have benefited from media training, some role playing, other preparation, but that one's kind of done. So to the point of the question, how do we move forward? So I'd suggest first go back to the drawing board, especially with this particular portfolio company, and identify who the best candidates really are for speaking to the media. I think it's a little too easy to always lean on the CEO as the go-to person or the founder or the other top executive that represents a bit of the figurehead of the organization. But it does not come naturally to a lot of people. I can think of several really large, successful companies in the healthcare industry where the CEOs or the founders or dual role are simply not natural in front of the media.
Yes.
So I'd suggest consider developing a roster of speakers so the burden doesn't always fall on that one person. And I think that appeals to different publications as well. The head of product might be good for one interview. The CFO might be better for another. So it gives multiple perspectives. It gives options for the media contacts, and it can keep the CEO from kind of being overutilized. And then I said it earlier, but media training, interview practice, not everybody has spoken to the media before. And maybe it's easy for an agency to forget that. I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
But even when people are very experienced in their careers and have been running around the block for 20 years, they are not necessarily well-versed in working with the media. So it can be daunting. So with that in mind, I'd say, preparation is key. Really be careful on, kind of who you're putting forward and make sure they're feeling really ready.
Yes. And I would add for this poor soul of this person, perhaps, and again, agencies can easily forget this. Perhaps you did not delineate the type of media. So in the earlier part of this question, print, podcast, national TV. Well, those are all very different situations. National TV is live in the hot seat or on Zoom and usually live situations versus print, which can be things you email in. That doesn't even have to be on a phoner, let's say. So it might be a suggestion to go, okay, yeah, we've passed through those opportunities. It is what it is. Now moving forward, let's talk about the types of media interviews we will engage with. Are we only going to do ones that are written responses where we send in the quotes written? Are we going to do non-live opportunities like this podcast is non-live so we can edit things? Is that going to be permissible? Are we ever going to do phoners? Are we just not ready for broadcast live TV? It's okay. That is that's like the varsity level. So maybe you're just not there yet. I get really clear on what is okay with your bench of people specifically. So there are no surprises, and God forbid there are no last minute cancellations for these poor producers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't considered the early part of that question. The type of coverage is so important. Some people are more natural with some versus others. That's just going to happen.
Yeah. And so often it's so common. Just someone's like, oh yeah, sure. And then they go, oh God, you mean that's on national TV live? That's being broadcast. My grandma can watch that. It's a totally different game when, live and broadcast and stuff versus, I emailed in my quotes. I mean, that's just the range of this is large. So I would suggest that and just get clear on that. And even have them, if you want to take it to the next level, have them put it in writing. If you're doing a little survey to, let's say you have 6 people on the bench, or have them just put on writing just to what we call cover our butts, COA, on just like, okay, well, Bob, you said you'd be okay with doing non-live opportunities. So that's what a podcast is. Or, you'd be okay with doing a phoner. Okay, so that's what you said there. Hey, we can change those every quarter or something to see how you maybe level up or change your perspectives. That's a lot of work, and that's really true. But if you really want to avoid the situation again, perhaps that's what you can do. There's my recommendation.
Couldn't agree more.
Catherine, I'm exhausted by these. Well, thank you for being on today. Those are all the questions we have. I'm glad you're phoning in from DC, one of my favorite places. How fun. And best of luck the rest of this quarter and this summer and all the good stuff.
Thank you, Beck, and to you. It's been great talking.
This is fun.
Again.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Dear BAMf, the advice podcast for PR and marketing pros like you. Our show was created by BAM, a PR and marketing agency headquartered in San Diego and New York City. The music you're enjoying today was composed by Tiffany Dizon, produced by Daniel Kessner, and played by San Diego Symphony's Art of Alon. If you have a tough PR and marketing question you'd like us to answer, write to us at bamtheagency.com/Dear BAMf. Don't forget the F. If you'd like to get notified of our latest episodes, subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.